Over the last 11 weeks, I've managed to log an average of 54.63 miles per week leading into this final taper week. And over these 11 weeks, I've managed a course PB at the Hereford 10K in December, followed by a new 5-mile PB of 26.13 and a 10-mile PB of 55.11. Training's gone well and there's just one more week to get through. So welcome back to another Alicante half marathon training series video. This is week 12, the final week. And in this week's video, I want to talk through my race plans, weather, overall thoughts on the training block itself, and then just a quick reminder as to what is coming up straight after this half marathon. But just before we jump into that, I'll give you a very quick snippet of what happened on Monday's run. It was a nice steady run. I shared some of my thoughts very quickly. I was hoping to record Tuesday's workout and showcase that today. It was going to be a smaller workout. However, I've realized I'm not going to have time to get back, edit that and get that into the video before I fly out to Spain. So I'll share these thoughts now and then we'll get on to what my race plans are. So welcome to race week. Here we go. Absolutely buzzing for this. So yeah, I fly out in 2 days, get a couple of runs done here in the UK, and I get a couple more done out there before the race on Sunday. So the plan of attack this week is steady 60 today, so I've basically brought things down from 90 to like 75, and now race week 60. And to be fair, I really relaxed in today. Usually my steady pace is around sort of anywhere from 6:35 to 6:55 depending on how I feel that day. First couple of miles are 7:10, so really just kind of easing into it. I've found my flow now, and I'll do a little session tomorrow before we fly out, and the rest of the week will just be easy running, which will be a shock to the system considering I've got used to doing 3 workouts a week for the last few weeks. Now I do have a race plan. I have all of that up here. I've been studying the course a lot and using Google Street View and all of that to trace the course, so I'm trying to memorize a lot of it, and I'll take a print out with me to just keep studying when I'm there. And yeah, we'll talk about that after. And just before we get into my race plans, I want to say a huge thank you to COROS for one more time for sponsoring this training series. Their support has been absolutely incredible from week 1 right through to race day. I'm excited to be wearing the Pace Pro and the heart rate monitor for the Alicante half marathon, as I have been doing through all this training block. Their data and metrics provided in the first half of this block have been invaluable when I've been working up on the hills to get my legs strong and ready for the second half of this block. And then of course in the second half I've been loving the data and watching the graphs increase as my fitness goes up. The current offer that they currently have will only be live for another couple of weeks, so if you're interested in picking up any COROS products, do check out the link in the description below to get yourself a free band when you are purchasing the COROS Pace Pro. It honestly comes really highly recommended from myself, and I can't wait to continue using the products after this training block. So once again, a massive thanks to COROS for sponsoring this video. So yes, apologies once again, I can't show the workout. As I said, I'm just going to run out of time trying to get all this edited. So let's dive into the race plans. There are 2 challenges I have with this half marathon. I knew what they were when I was signing up and I was super excited. It's why a lot of this training block has had a lot of hills in it. I'm very excited. We've got around about 450, 60-ish foot, judging by a couple of people's runs on Strava. So that's going to be relatively hilly, not horrific, but it's certainly not going to be pan flat. And a lot of those hills come in the first half of the run, or I should say a lot of the bigger hills. So I'll pop on the screen now what that elevation is so you can see it. You can see in the first part of the route that the big hills are there. The second half of the route does look to be relatively lumpy, but it's certainly not got the big stingers in it that the first half has. So what my race plan is going to be is basically the first hill starts within the first kilometre. Now I have to bear in mind, and we'll talk about this in a second, it's going to be a lot warmer out there than it is here. Now my heart rate has definitely come down over this training block, but the key here is going to be not to spike that heart rate too early. And with this first big hill to kickstart after the first kilometre, I have to be really careful not to redline within the first mile or 2. Now I will say I'm fully locked into this race and I'm going to give it my absolute all, but I also have to be really sensible, because if I do redline super early, I'm going to absolutely blow any chances of running fast in the second half of the race. So my approach is going to be this: that first kilometre or first mile as I start to climb up the hill is going to be on the cautious side, definitely more so in the late 5:30s, early 5 or even mid 5:40s per mile, maybe even 5:50. I don't know what it's going to be like. Basically, my target half marathon time and my target pace on a flat and fast course right now would be somewhere between 5:30 per mile and 5:33 per mile. That's what I'd like to target, and that would get me quite a big and hefty PB. However, I have to be aware, as I said, of these hills, and so I don't want to be near that in that first mile or 2 or 3. However, after the first couple of miles or 3 miles, I think it is, we then have a downhill. At that point, that's when I want to start locking in, so that I know when I've got 10 miles to go, that's when I really start to push. I've kind of had that mindset before in the past when I've raced half marathons, where I kind of get to mile 3, I've got 10 miles to go, and I really drop the hammer. However, I've been racing a lot more aggressively more recently and kind of going at it from the gun, which I've been really enjoying, and I've found that it's given me a good challenge, and I've had some good results from it. So that's definitely what I want to be doing in a race in a couple of weeks' time, which we'll talk about shortly. However, for this one, I think it's going to be really sensible that I just don't do that in the start. I conserve a little bit so that when I get to the top of that first big hill, I've got a bit of something in the tank to come down the other side, and then I can really lock in and go for it. And from there, from that moment, after sort of mile 3, coming down the other side, I do have one more relatively big hill, which I'll probably approach with caution, but I'm not going to back off on it as much. And when I get to the top of that one, I think that's around 4-ish miles, 4.5. At that point, there will be no backing off whatsoever. I will put my foot down that downhill. I have a nice coastal stretch to run back into town and around the other side of town, and there, when it starts to get lumpy, I plan to absolutely hit that as hard as I can. And the thing is, obviously, this race plan will not work if I go out way too hard, so I am going to err on the side of caution, as I mentioned. And as I said, at the top of mile 3, or when I get to that first hill, that's when I'll start to ease off the brakes and really start to push it. And when I get up that big second hill, that's when I'll really kind of let go and just absolutely go to town. But the next thing that I have to mention, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is the weather. Now, looking at the weather, I'm going to be out there, and it's going to be in and around anywhere between 18 to 20 degrees for most of the days out there. But in the morning, around race start, it should be around about 10 to 13 degrees, and it hopefully won't get more than 15 by the time I'm finished, which of course is a massive jump from what I'm used to training in right now, which is pretty much around freezing up to about 4 or 5 degrees. However, I am going to try not to let that deter me. I know that's going to be a factor. I have to be really sensible and know that that factors into my race plan. As I said, if my heart rate gets way too high, way too early, especially on those hills in the warmer weather, I'm absolutely cooked. So there's no point in going any further. But I have to bear this in mind. I'm also going to utilize the water stations on the course, which is something I don't usually do. Probably just swill the water around in my mouth to trick my brain a little bit into thinking that I've taken some fluid on board. I usually get stitches if I drink during a half marathon, so I'm not going to take too much, but I am going to utilize them. I think if I don't, I could be cooked before I even start. And my goal and hope is that the weather changes slightly, so we've got a bit of cloud coverage. I know it's going to be warm, but if there's a bit of cloud coverage, that would be fantastic. But otherwise, I do have to bear that in mind. So that is a factor. And again, not going to be a factor for 2 weeks later. But again, we'll talk about that shortly. Overall training block thoughts. How do I feel the block has gone? Well, overall, as I think I've mentioned a few times now, I haven't quite hit the mileage heights that I'd have liked to, but I can't complain. I've got the training done that I've wanted to. It's just the supporting mileage around the outside of that that's been a little bit lower. Overall though, I've clocked some great results in some races. Very happy. I can definitely feel fitness has improved, and I'm excited for what that's setting me up for after this, which is going to be a 5K training block. For this one, the goal was simply to get Abingdon Marathon done, enjoy that training block, which I really struggled to do. The focus then was on this one to really absolutely just do what you want and enjoy it whilst you're doing it. And I've had a blast. This has been a great training block, very similar to what I did in the summer. Very, very happy with the feelings on this one, and I'm excited to carry that on into the 5K block. I think if I could have changed anything during this block, I probably would have tried to have snuck in 1 or 2 more slightly longer runs, but other than that, I've done what I've wanted to do. I've got a few up to around 1 hour 45, 1 hour 50 with workouts in them, and I do feel like that's enough. I feel like I'm one of those confidence-based runners that likes to think if I can run a certain amount of time out on feet, I'm going to get more benefit from it, and often that's not the case. I just need to look at the quality that I've put in, and the race results have shown that. So I'm kind of trying to take that into this race this weekend, have that belief system behind me, and know that I can hopefully go out there and do something special. But of course, we always know what happens on race day. Sometimes it can go great and sometimes it can't. So what's next? What's after this? Well, of course, I think I've mentioned before, it's not just this half marathon that I've got before I lock into my 5K training. I've got this race this weekend, the Alicante half marathon. Next weekend, I've got Bourton 10K, and then to complete the triple, I've got the Newport half marathon. So that's the other one one that I have my eye on. I feel like Bourton might need to be sacrificed a little bit in terms of like my focus, because I really want to lock in and get a good half marathon time under my belt. Newport, what are going to be the pros and cons? Well, of course, UK temperatures. So I'm going to have the weather on my side. Hopefully it's not too windy. However, what I do know is I'll have 2 races in my legs at that point. So I don't know how I'm going to feel, which is why after that, if Newport doesn't also go well, and then 3 weeks later, I've got potentially another half marathon booked. However, throwing a curveball in there, if Newport does go well, I also have another race booked on that day, which is a flat and fast 10K, which I might pivot to if the Newport half marathon goes well. So stay tuned for more information on that one. There's a lot resting on these upcoming 2 half marathons. So I think that's all I want to say at this point. I really appreciate your support during this training block. It's been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for following along with the journey. Of course, thanks to COROS for sponsoring the training series. I've been so grateful to have their support throughout this training series too. And here we go. I can't wait to get out and race. Of course, when you see this video, I will be racing. So of course, check it on Strava to see how I get on. And I'll get a video out as soon as I get back from Spain. I've got a couple of videos hopefully scheduled for next week. So hopefully you'll see those before my result. But I'll make sure I do a community post out there to let you guys know how I got on. That is it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for your support. For one last time, I'll leave a couple of videos on screen here for the Boddington 10 and here for the Linda Franks 5. You can see how those 2 races panned out during this training block, and hopefully very soon I'll have the Alicante half marathon race vlog to share with you. So I'll see you guys over on one of those.